She was told to wait outside by a flight attendant who thought she didn't belong in first class. The unassuming woman in the beige cardigan didn't argue. She simply nodded and stepped aside. What the airline staff didn't know was that by tomorrow, she would bring their entire company to its knees. Sarah Chen preferred to remain invisible. At 42, she'd built a reputation as one of the most formidable investment strategists in Chicago. But you'd never know it by looking at her. Her shoulder-length black hair framed a face that wore minimal makeup. Her wardrobe consisted primarily of functional, comfortable pieces, like the beige merino cardigan she wore today. Miss Chen, the board meeting has been confirmed for tomorrow. All major shareholders will be present. Her assistant's voice came through her earpiece as Sarah navigated O'Hare International Airport. "Thank you, Michael. And a report on customer satisfaction?" Sarah asked, her voice low as she maneuvered through the crowd. "Just received the preliminary data. It's concerning." Sarah nodded to herself. This was precisely why she decided to take this flight. Skyline Airways had been hemorrhaging customers for months. As the second-largest individual shareholder, she'd suggested implementing a mystery passenger program to evaluate the airline's service firsthand. The board had agreed, but she'd taken it a step further, deciding to be the first mystery passenger herself. "Keep me posted on any changes," she said, ending the call. At the premium check-in counter, Sarah presented her first-class ticket and ID. The attendant barely glanced at them, her fingers tapping against the keyboard with bored efficiency. "Reason for travel, ma'am?" the attendant asked mechanically. "Business," Sarah replied, maintaining her deliberately nondescript persona. The attendant handed back her documents. "Gate 36C boarding begins in 45 minutes. Sarah thanked her and headed towards security. Her carry-on contained only essentials, a change of clothes, her laptop, and a small notebook where she jotted observations. Today's flight would determine whether she'd push for a complete overhaul of Skyline's customer service protocols. After clearing security, Sarah walked past luxury boutiques toward the first-class lounge. Skyline's lounge had once been the jewel of the airline, but according to reports, service had declined sharply in the past year. She wanted to experience it firsthand. At the lounge entrance, she presented her boarding pass to a young man with a pleasant smile. "Welcome to the Skyline Premier Lounge, Ms. Chen. Please enjoy your stay." Inside, Sarah observed the half-empty space. A server approached high-profile-looking guests promptly while ignoring others. She made mental notes: selective service, understaffing, inconsistent attention to guests. An hour later, Sarah headed to her gate. The flight to New York was routine for her, a quick 90-minute trip she'd made countless times. As she approached gate 36C, she noticed the gate agent, a blonde woman in a crisp navy uniform, speaking sharply to an elderly couple. "I'm sorry, but we've already begun boarding premium passengers. You'll need to wait." Sarah frowned, noting the way the agent's tone shifted when a well-dressed businessman approached immediately after. "Right this way, sir. Have a wonderful flight." When it was her turn, Sarah presented her boarding pass. The gate agent, whose name tag read Melissa Porter, barely glanced at it before her eyes swept critically over Sarah's simple attire. "First class?" Melissa asked, skepticism dripping from her words. "Yes," Sarah replied simply. Melissa's perfectly shaped eyebrows raised slightly. "Are you sure you're at the correct gate? This is the first-class boarding line." Sarah remained calm. "Unaware. My boarding pass indicates seat 3B, first class." Melissa's eyes narrowed as she scanned the boarding pass again, her manicured finger tapping against the counter. This, Sarah noted, would be the first real test of Skyline's customer service. How they treated passengers who didn't fit their preconceived notion of first class. "Ma'am, could you step aside, please? We need to verify something with your ticket." Melissa's voice had shifted from skeptical to authoritative. Sarah noticed several passengers watching the interaction with curious eyes. She remained calm but firm. Is there a problem with my boarding pass? Just step aside, please. Melissa gestured impatiently toward a waiting area. We have priority passengers who need to board. Sarah watched as Melissa waved through 3 more passengers, all in business attire, without checking their boarding passes as thoroughly as she had Sarah's. The discrimination wasn't subtle. After several minutes of being ignored, Sarah approached the counter again. Excuse me, I believe I've waited long enough. My flight is boarding now. Melissa barely looked up. Ma'am, as I said, we're verifying your ticket. First class is for premium customers. Her eyes flicked dismissively over Sarah's simple beige cardigan and comfortable travel pants. Perhaps there's been a mix-up with your booking. There's no mix-up, Sarah replied evenly. Melissa sighed dramatically, then picked up a phone. She spoke in hushed tones, occasionally glancing at Sarah with thinly veiled disdain. Finally, she hung up and approached. Miss Chen, we're going to need to rebook you. It appears there's been an overbooking in first class. Sarah's eyebrows raised slightly. Interesting, since I checked in online and selected my seat this morning. These things happen, Melissa replied with artificial sweetness. We can accommodate you in economy on this flight, or rebook you in first class on a later flight. By now, a small audience had gathered, other passengers watching the exchange with varying degrees of interest. Sarah noticed an older gentleman frowning at the gate agent's behavior, while a young woman was surreptitiously recording the interaction on her phone. May I see your supervisor? Sarah asked quietly. Melissa's smile tightened. My supervisor is currently unavailable. Unauthorized to handle this situation. She lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. Look, we both know this ticket was probably a mistake. Someone like you doesn't normally fly first class with us. The comment hung in the air between them. Sarah felt a flicker of anger, but maintained her composure. Someone like me? You know what I mean. Melissa's eyes darted to Sarah's simple attire again. Our first-class experience is curated for a certain clientele. We need to ensure all our premium passengers feel comfortable. A flight attendant approached from the jet bridge. Melissa, is everything okay here? She asked, her eyes immediately assessing Sarah with the same dismissive glance. Just a ticketing issue, Rebecca, Melissa replied. Miss Chen here thinks she should be in first class. Rebecca's perfectly painted lips curved into a cold smile. I see. She turned to Sarah, her hand moving to grasp Sarah's arm firmly but politely. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside the boarding area while we sort this out. Wait outside. Sarah repeated, noting the touch on her arm, a power move designed to physically assert authority. Yes, Rebecca said firmly. The other first-class passengers are boarding now, and we can't have disruptions. Sarah glanced around the gate area. Every pair of eyes seemed fixed on their exchange. She could fight this, demand her rightful seat, escalate to management, create a scene. But that wouldn't serve her ultimate purpose. Instead, she took a calculated step back, disengaging from Rebecca's grip. I understand, she said quietly. Confusion flashed briefly across both women's faces. They clearly expected resistance. I'll wait, Sarah continued, her voice steady. But I would like both your employee numbers, please. The women exchanged glances. Rebecca's smile became brittle. That won't be necessary. We're simply following company protocol. Nevertheless, Sarah insisted, pulling out her phone. I'd like to document who I spoke with today. Reluctantly, they provided their information, which Sarah carefully noted in her phone. She then walked to a nearby row of seats, sat down, and watched as the last of the first-class passengers boarded. 10 minutes later, Melissa approached with a revised boarding pass. We found you a seat in economy, row 29, middle seat. It's the best we can do. Sarah accepted the boarding pass without argument. As she joined the line for general boarding, She pulled out her phone and sent a brief text to Michael. Change of plans. Move tomorrow's meeting to 8:30 am sharp and contact legal. I want them there. As she boarded the plane, Sarah nodded politely to Rebecca, who stood at the cabin door. The flight attendant's smug expression faltered slightly at Sarah's calm demeanor. Walking past the first-class cabin she'd been denied, Sarah made a mental note of every detail. This wasn't a setback. This was ammunition. The cramped economy seat was far from comfortable, but Sarah wasn't focused on the lack of legroom. Her mind was already crafting a strategy. She pulled out her notebook, ignoring the passenger next to her, who struggled to avoid encroaching on her limited space. Sarah wrote a single question at the top of the page. How systemic is the problem? She underlined it twice. The flight attendant who had blocked her from first class, Rebecca, walked past, deliberately avoiding eye contact. Sarah observed how Rebecca's demeanor changed dramatically when interacting with different passengers. Warm and attentive with well-dressed business travelers, perfunctory with everyone else. When the drink service came around, Sarah pressed the call button to request a glass of water. 5 minutes passed. 10. Finally, she pressed it again. You need to be patient, Rebecca said when she finally responded, not bothering to hide her irritation. We're serving a full flight. Sarah noticed the woman across the aisle had received her requested beverage almost immediately after asking. Another data point. She opened her laptop, careful to angle the screen away from curious eyes, and accessed a secure server. Here lay the real reason Skyline's board had agreed to her mystery passenger program. The airline's customer satisfaction scores had plummeted over the past 8 months, correlating directly with the tenure of their new head of customer experience, Lisa Harrington. Sarah pulled up the file on Harrington, an impressive resume on paper, luxury retail background, promises to elevate the airline's premium offerings. But the data told a different story. Complaints up 47%, particularly regarding discriminatory treatment and inconsistent service. Sarah's fingers flew over the keyboard as she documented today's experience in detailed, dispassionate language. She attached her original boarding pass confirmation, the timestamp of when she was denied boarding, and the employee numbers she collected. A notification popped up on her screen, an email from Michael with an attachment. Sarah opened it to find compiled statements from 17 former Skyline employees, all highlighting troubling patterns. Directives to prioritize passengers who looked the part, informal profiling systems, and explicit instructions to upsell or rebook passengers who didn't fit the airline's premium image. She'd been building this case for months, piece by piece. Today's experience wasn't just an isolated incident. It was confirmation of a pattern she'd suspected since reviewing the declining satisfaction metrics. Sarah opened another secure file, Skyline's shareholder agreement. As she reviewed the ethics clause her legal team had insisted on when she'd made her initial investment 3 years ago, a subtle smile formed on her lips. Section 8.4 was explicit. Documented evidence of systematic discriminatory practices constituted grounds for emergency board action, including removal of executives. She drafted 3 emails. One to her legal team. Prepare injunctive relief documents based on Section 8.4. Have them ready for tomorrow. 2 to her media contacts. Holding statement ready by 8:30 am tomorrow. Will advise on distribution. 3 to the Skyline Board Secretary. Per shareholder agreement Section 11.22, I formally request the floor for the first 20 minutes of tomorrow's meeting. This is non-negotiable. As the plane began its descent into New York, Sarah closed her laptop and leaned back in her cramped seat. She caught Rebecca staring at her from the front of the cabin, that same dismissive look on her face. Sarah smiled politely in return, which seemed to unsettle the flight attendant. Little did Rebecca know that in less than 24 hours, Sarah would completely transform Skyline Airways, starting with the customer service department. The plane touched down with a gentle thud. As passengers around her rushed to retrieve their belongings, Sarah remained seated, making one final note in her journal. They never asked why I was flying to New York. If they had, they might have realized their mistake. I was heading to their company headquarters all along. The sleek offices of Chen Strategic Investments occupied the 42nd floor of a Manhattan high-rise. By 6:30 am, Sarah had already been there for an hour, the simple beige cardigan replaced by a tailored navy suit that transformed her appearance entirely. "The legal team is assembled in conference room 2, Michael said, placing a coffee on her desk. "And I've compiled everything you requested." Sarah nodded. The Skyline board members, all confirmed for 8:30. None declined once they heard you called the meeting. Michael hesitated. "There's something else. That video taken by the passenger at the gate yesterday, it's gaining traction online." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Show me." Michael turned his tablet toward her. The shaky footage showed Sarah's interaction with Melissa and Rebecca. The moment when she was told to wait outside, clearly captured. The caption read, "Skyline Airways refusing first-class passenger because she doesn't look the part. Classism in the skies." 50,000 views since last night. "Interesting timing," Sarah noted. "Any response from Skyline PR?" "Standard boilerplate about investigating the matter. They don't realize it's you." "They will soon enough," Sarah replied, rising from her desk. "Let's meet with legal." In conference room 2, Sarah stood before her assembled team, 4 attorneys, 2 data analysts, and her chief financial officer. On the display screen behind her was a comprehensive presentation that they had worked through the night to prepare. Skyline's discriminatory practices aren't just morally reprehensible, Sarah explained, gesturing to a chart. They're financially disastrous. Customer retention down 23%. Premium bookings sliding. Their stock has dropped 17% in 6 months. "And you experienced it firsthand," Olivia Martinez, the chief counsel, noted. Sarah nodded. "And I had it documented. But one incident isn't enough. Show me what else we have." The data analyst, James, took over. "We've identified 116 complaints in the past quarter that followed the same pattern. Passengers being denied service, downgraded, or mistreated based on appearance or perceived status. We've verified and compiled 43 of them with solid documentation." "The real smoking gun," added Pryor, the second analyst, "is this internal memo from Lisa Harrington to the cabin crew supervisors." She displayed an email on screen, highlighting a specific paragraph. "Remember our new premium strategy. First class is our flagship product and must maintain a certain aesthetic. Use your discretion with passengers who might diminish the experience for our high-value customers." Sarah felt a cold anger reading those words. This violates not just our ethics clause, but potentially federal aviation regulations on discriminatory practices. "Olivia, what's our strongest approach?" Olivia opened her folder. "We have 3 options. 1. Standard shareholder action requesting board investigation, slow, potentially gets buried. 2. Public press campaign using your experience as leverage, effective but messy. 3. Invoke Section 8.4, which allows emergency board action with documented ethics violations." Option 3, Sarah decided. "We'll need the votes." "You already have 21% personally," the CFO noted. "We've identified at least 33% more who will likely back you if presented with this evidence." Sarah nodded. "That's enough to force immediate action." She turned to Michael. "Is everything ready for my demonstration?" Michael smiled slightly. "Exactly as you specified. Your clothes from yesterday are prepared, and we have a complete reproduction of your boarding experience." Sarah checked her watch. 7:45 am, time to get ready. The board won't know what hit them. The boardroom of Skyline Airways exuded corporate luxury, all walnut tables and leather chairs, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Manhattan's skyline. By 8:25 am, all 12 board members had arrived, along with the executive team, including CEO Jonathan Reynolds and Head of Customer Experience Lisa Harrington. They chatted among themselves, curiosity evident in their expressions. Emergency board meetings were rare, especially ones called by a typically silent investor. At precisely 8:30 am, the door opened. Conversations halted as Sarah walked in, not in corporate attire, but wearing the exact same beige cardigan and casual pants from yesterday's flight. Several board members failed to hide their surprise. CEO Reynolds recovered first, extending his hand. "Miss Chen, this is unexpected. We typically see your representative at these meetings." Sarah shook his hand firmly. "Today required my personal attention." Lisa Harrington leaned toward the man beside her, whispering something that made him smirk. Sarah noted this without comment. "I understand you've requested the first 20 minutes," the board chairman said. "The floor is yours." Sarah walked to the front of the room, her manner calm and deliberate. "Thank you, Chairman Wilson. Before I begin my formal presentation, I have a question for Ms. Harrington." Lisa straightened, surprise flashing across her face. "Yes." Sarah's voice remained conversational. "Your new premium strategy. Does it include instructing staff to discriminate against passengers based on appearance?" The room went silent. Lisa's smile froze. "I don't know what you're talking about." "That's interesting," Sarah replied, picking up a remote, "because yesterday I experienced your strategy firsthand." She pressed a button, and the video from the gate appeared on the massive screen behind her, showing Sarah being denied boarding, told to wait outside, and physically blocked from the first-class line. As the footage played, Sarah watched the board members' expressions shift from confusion to growing unease. "Now," Sarah said as the video ended, "let me show you what happens to customers who don't fit your premium aesthetic." The boardroom remained deathly silent as Sarah pressed another button on the remote. The screen split to show multiple videos, all displaying similar incidents of passengers being treated dismissively, denied service, or removed from premium areas. 43 documented cases in the last quarter alone, Sarah stated, her voice steady. All following the directive from Ms. Harrington to maintain a certain aesthetic in your premium cabins. Lisa Harrington shifted uncomfortably. "These are isolated incidents. You can't possibly." "This is the internal memo you sent to cabin supervisors," Sarah interrupted, displaying the email on screen. "And here are the testimonials from 17 former employees confirming these practices were not only encouraged but required." CEO Jonathan Reynolds' face had paled considerably. "Ms. Chen, I assure you, if these practices exist, they aren't company policy." "They exist," Sarah replied firmly. "I've experienced them myself, and according to Section 8.4 of our shareholder agreement, documented evidence of systematic discriminatory practices constitutes grounds for emergency board action." The company's legal counsel, a stern-faced woman at the end of the table, leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing, Ms. Chen?" Sarah gestured to her team waiting outside the glass doors. "My legal counsel has prepared the necessary documents. I'm invoking my rights as a major shareholder to call for immediate removal of those responsible and implementation of comprehensive anti-discrimination measures." Lisa Harrington stood abruptly. "This is absurd. You can't possibly have the authority." "I own 21% of this airline, Ms. Harrington," Sarah stated calmly. "And I've already secured the support of shareholders representing an additional 33%. The room erupted in murmurs. Jonathan Reynolds looked stricken. "Furthermore," Sarah continued, "the viral video of my experience has already accumulated over 250,000 views since last night. Your stock dropped 5% in pre-market trading this morning. By the time the markets close today, the damage to your brand could be irreparable, unless decisive action is taken. Chairman Wilson cleared his throat. What sort of action are you suggesting, specifically? Sarah opened a folder, sliding documents across the polished table. Immediate removal of Lisa Harrington. A public statement acknowledging these discriminatory practices and outlining concrete steps to eliminate them. Creation of an independent customer advocacy board with real authority, and a compensation fund for affected passengers. She paused, letting the gravity of the moment sink in. Either this happens today, or I take my evidence public and initiate a class action lawsuit that will make yesterday's incident look like a minor inconvenience. Jonathan Reynolds loosened his tie, his eyes darting between Sarah and the other board members. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. No, Sarah said firmly. No more hiding. This airline has systematically discriminated against passengers based on appearance and perceived status. It ends today. The board chairman studied the documents before him, then looked up at the incriminating evidence still displayed on screen. I believe Ms. Chen has presented compelling evidence that warrants immediate action. He turned to the airline's legal counsel. Your assessment. The lawyer's face remained impassive, but her response was telling. The shareholder agreement is clear. With the evidence presented and the voting shares Ms. Chen has consolidated, we have little choice. Sarah stepped back, watching as the realization settled over the room. The power dynamic had completely reversed. The board members who had initially viewed her with mild curiosity now regarded her with a mixture of respect and apprehension. Lisa Harrington, sensing the shifting tide, attempted one last defense. This is one person's experience being blown out of proportion. No, Ms. Harrington, Sarah cut her off. This is accountability, something your leadership has been sorely lacking. She gestured to Michael, who opened the boardroom doors. Olivia and 2 other attorneys entered, carrying additional documentation. Now, Sarah said, taking a seat at the head of the table, shall we begin restructuring this airline? 1 week later, Sarah stood in the Skyline Departure Lounge at O'Hare International Airport. The changes were already visible: new signage outlining passenger rights, diverse staff engaging with all travelers equally, and a noticeably different atmosphere. On the television mounted above the seating area, a financial news channel displayed Skyline's recovering stock price alongside headlines about the company's dramatic leadership shakeup and revolutionary customer-first initiatives. Your flight is ready for boarding, Ms. Chen, a gate agent announced, approaching with respect rather than the condescension Sarah had experienced just days earlier. As Sarah walked toward the gate, she spotted a familiar face. Rebecca, the flight attendant who had blocked her from first class, no longer working at the gate. She was now collecting boarding passes in economy class, her expression subdued. Their eyes met briefly. Recognition dawned on Rebecca's face, followed by shock and embarrassment. Sarah simply nodded and continued walking. Boarding the plane, Sarah was greeted by a new head flight attendant who showed her to her first-class seat with genuine professionalism. We've implemented comprehensive changes to our service protocols, the airline's new customer experience director had informed her yesterday. Every employee is undergoing retraining. Sarah settled into her seat, reflecting on the past week's events. She hadn't set out to destroy Skyline Airways, merely to transform it. Sometimes true power wasn't about flaunting wealth or status, but knowing exactly when and how to use it. The beige cardigan remained in her closet, a reminder that respect should never depend on appearances.